My passion is improving the efficiency and effectiveness of healthcare delivery. And a lot of that is by you cannot treat a patient when you yourself are not at your best. And a lot of the time, nurses are not at their best because of things that we can fix with the schedule, right? So either people are doing self-scheduling. So if you are the first person to self-schedule, then you might get a good schedule. But if you're the last person to self-schedule, then you get all the leftovers. So maybe sometimes you get a great schedule, but not all of the time. So my goal is to kind of flatten that curve so that everyone gets 85 to 90% solution 100% of the time.
Welcome to another episode of Copper Digital Podcast. Hello, everyone. I'm Arvind Sarin. And today I'm so excited to be joined by Laurel Chiaramonte. She started nursing in 2005 as a military nurse. And while she was writing schedules for her unit, she took 12 to 18 hours. And in her words, it was super painful. Her husband, an industrial engineer, looked at what she was doing and said, this could be simplified with algorithms. That was back in 2007. Today, Laurel is the CEO of Duality Systems, and their scheduling algorithms are being used by military to schedule everything from satellite watch floors to drone pilots to missile silo operations. Laurel, welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks for having me. I'm really excited to be here.
Me too. I've been thinking about this conversation and, of course, such an inspiring story. So let's go back to 2005. You're a military nurse, you're writing schedules, and it's taking 12 to 18 hours. Walk me through what that actually looked like on the ground.
Yeah, absolutely. So about a month before the schedule was supposed to be released, I would put a big Excel spreadsheet printout on the door of the nurses' station, and I would tell the nurses, fill in the days that you can't work. And then I would pull it off the door a couple of weeks later, and I would spend, like you said, 12 to 18, sometimes more hours writing the schedule. So we always had to make sure we had a charge nurse. We always needed to make sure that we had at least 3 or 4 nurses on during the day, 2 at night. We have weekends, we have holidays. We needed X amount of technicians. So different certifications, different types and flavors of nurses at different times throughout 24/7 operations. It was horrible. It was a horrible experience. Anyone who has done any sort of complex scheduling can understand and kind of empathize, I think, with what we experienced there. It was a super small floor, so I can't even imagine trying to do that with a larger scale when you're talking 100 nurses or more. So my husband saw my pain, and he was working on his PhD, and he said, let me fix this for you. He did a lot of research. He found out that there are over, for me and my small floor, there are over 7,000 variables that I was trying to consider when I was writing. Yeah, it was a lot. So in my brain, I could come up with like maybe 1 or 2 alternatives to make the schedule as best as it could be. His algorithm looks at tens of thousands of potential schedules, and it does it in less than 5 minutes for my small floor. At the end of the day, so it was more than a 99% improvement in the amount of time that it took me to write the schedule. There was a 56% improvement in how nurses perceived the schedule and how they were satisfied with the schedule. So they liked his schedule more than my blood, sweat, and tears schedule. And it basically eliminated perceived bias. So people who thought that I was giving them a bad schedule because I didn't like them. So it's pretty cool. At the end of the day, I got to be back on the floor being a nurse and leading the nurses that were there with me, being more present in my job. And we didn't have to bring someone in to cover my patients so that I could spend an inordinate amount of time writing that schedule.
Wow. So let's break that down a little bit more. So how many nurses were you responsible for scheduling?
Yeah, so there were only like 40 or 50 of us, probably 40. It was a long time ago. But yeah.
And it may seem like a small number, but when you consider, for those of us that are engineers, when you consider in an algorithmic way, like what is a traveling sales problem? It's like, let's say there are 5 cities that a salesman needs to travel to, then you can only go there one, or you only have to go there once, and what is going to be the shortest path? Well, let's say if there's 3 cities, then it's easy. You have you either go from A to B, B to C, or A to C. So there's only 4 combinations or but then as you increase the number of cities because of the factorial, the combinations become a lot. So I was doing the math earlier. So with five, it becomes 120 possible routes. But guess what? With 10, it becomes 3.6 million possibilities. But hold
Yeah.
on a second. With 20, it becomes 2.4 quintillion possibilities. Human brain, there's no way can account for all of that. So 40 means probably some crazy number, of course, for the number of combinations. And how is that even
Right.
possible for somebody to be able to do that? But I feel like you get this illusion of control a little bit, that, okay, you know what? I have the ability to ask somebody. And why it's so interesting to me is because, as we talked, we're in the home health space where we're driving innovation in home health, and the main primary resource is the clinician. And the clinician is the one who's going out there taking care of the patients and doing the assessment, coming up with the care plan, all of this stuff. And then there are so many like constraints, and there's not enough nurses right now who are available. So all of the home health agencies, even the mid-sized ones with, let's say, 10 to 15 nurses, have a huge problem. And it's impossible to do it right, just by remembering. And trust me, like out of a dozen companies that I would talk to every month, at least 70% of them do everything manually, like on sheets of paper. And this is like 2026. So
Yeah.
when you saw that, and when you had this ability to get it done in 5 minutes, and the nurses liked it more, what did you do about it, and how did you want to like take it to another level, or make more people be aware and make it available for everybody else? Tell us about that journey.
Yeah, so we, my husband retired from the Air Force, so he finished his PhD work, retired, and he put a user interface on the front end. So he started off like we couldn't really use it because it was all coded, it was all on the back end and plugged into his algorithm. So putting a user interface on the front end, and then just going out and like my passion is improving the efficiency and effectiveness of healthcare delivery. And a lot of that is by you cannot treat a patient when you yourself are not at your best. And a lot of the time nurses are not at their best because of things that we can fix with the schedule, right? So either people are doing self-scheduling. So if you are the first person to self-schedule, then you might get a good schedule. But if you're the last person to self-schedule, then you get all the leftovers. So maybe sometimes you get a great schedule, but not all of the time. So my goal is to kind of flatten that curve so that everyone gets an 85 to 90% solution 100% of the time. So it's not the perfect schedule, but if I prefer to work weekends or I don't prefer to work weekends, I can plug that into the schedule. It's just adding another variable into the algorithm. So my goal as a clinical nurse specialist, improving the health the efficiency and effectiveness of healthcare delivery, my goal is to empower nurses to have a little bit more control over their schedules so that they are happier, they can provide better care to their patients because they themselves are feeling good about their.
And we know this from psychology as well. Unless you fill your cup, you have
Yep.
nothing to share. So it
Yeah.
makes sense. And yes, I see that in the number one problem, in healthcare, the nurses burnout. I mean, it's just so real. And there are so many communities that are now trying to spread that awareness, and, provide these new tools to nurses so they can actually have sort of a co-pilot, a friend in the entire sort of experience, and somebody just they could rely on and ask, and just be a friend in providing that care, and just focus on providing care.
Right.
So
Yeah.
when you put a UI to it, was it then easy for you to go to the nurses and say, or the hospitals even, or military facilities that needed scheduling? How did that go then after that?
You'd think it would be super easy, right? Here's a tool. Implementation is easy. It's not expensive because it's AI driven. It doesn't depend on more people, but it's actually really hard. We went to market in 2021, so COVID was still very fresh in everyone's minds. Hospitals' budgets were sapped. And so we actually had a really hard time. We're still having a really hard time getting into healthcare. So luckily for us, we are a veteran-owned small business. We're all, I think, 85% of my company, my small business is veterans. So we were able to pivot and go and talk to the Department of Defense, and it's all the same problem. So you mentioned drone pilots and you mentioned satellite watch floors. You think that we're all special snowflakes and scheduling looks different for everyone, but it's the same problem. It's different certifications, different types of people that need to be somewhere 24/7. It's thousands of variables and billions of potential schedule outcomes that the computer, the algorithm can just do better. So we've been able to pivot a little bit, but like I said, my passion is getting back to nurses and healthcare professionals in general. If you have a hard scheduling problem, if it's taking you more than an hour to write a schedule, you're spending that time somewhere that you can be spending it better, right?
And I learned about this problem also during or right before pandemic. There we developed an Uber-like experience for the hospitals to request clinicians' shifts to be filled out, and the clinicians who are independent, obviously wanting that flexibility, could just have the app and upload all of their licenses and say, okay, I'll take that shift. And if it was, let's say, a shift that was harder to fill, then the providers could even offer incentives or overtime pay. And so that's how I learned about the nurse shortages. But then later on, as I started to get into home health, it was very evident, and especially because a home health agency is not as sophisticated with systems and processes like a hospital. And really, when you think about it, it's the nurse going alone to the patient's home and making all the decisions and doing the entire assessment. And it becomes very difficult, as a job if you're not properly supported with the technology. So you trialed it at military, I guess, because healthcare wasn't ready to listen. What was the
Yeah.
reaction like?
So we were able, the drone situation that we talked about, they had 3 active duty Air Force drone pilots and 2 civilian contractors who were spending 700 hours combined to write a schedule for a month. So we're talking the initial
Whoa.
schedule and then filling when missions would fall off or be rescheduled or whatever. 700 hours, and we were able to decrease that to about 15 minutes with our algorithm. So just fantastic results, getting those pilots back to their mission, getting those contractors back to that mission is really important because we're not, most of us, we're not hired to write a schedule. And most of our brains are not as sophisticated as an AI algorithm that can go through it quickly. Now, I'm not saying it's perfect. We definitely still need human oversight. We still want someone to go back and look at it and say, yes, this makes sense. Or, oh, hey, we probably need to switch this person. We still have we're working right now actually on creating a system for bidding for shifts. So to your point, if you have a shift that isn't filled, being able to open that up for bidding. So there's still for someone else to fill it.
Very interesting point.
Definitely.
So, like, do you
Yeah.
earn some karma points that you could use later on when you?
Yeah.
Wow, that
Yeah,
sounds
exactly.
very interesting.
Yeah. And also to your point, so when you open up a shift for someone else to fill, are you filling it internally and you're paying someone overtime? Are you filling it externally and you're paying a travel nurse to fill it? Because that difference in revenue is calculable, right? So at what point is the revenue that I'm getting or the cost of paying overtime, at what point is that going past what you would be paying for a travel nurse, et cetera? So you can do a little bit of revenue balancing. Leadership is getting all those data points, and they can make hiring choices. It's
Understood.
kind of
Understood.
cool stuff.
Looks like then it was, it showed the results, it showed the ROI, but still it wasn't, like it wasn't obvious to everybody else. And this is something that I've experienced too. You built something that clearly saves
Mhm.
money, but sometimes the customers still won't pay for it. Why do you think that is? What's your perspective on why that? Why is that case?
I think that in a lot of organizations, the people who feel the pain are very separate from the people who hold the purse strings. So I know that this would benefit my life immensely, but to ask someone who is three rungs above me to pay for it might be difficult because they see like, well, it's getting done. The problem is getting solved. Why would I pay for something else to solve the problem? They don't necessarily see the pain on the ground floor. So I think that's probably one of the issues. A lot of smaller facilities where there's less differentiation between the ranks. A lot of folks just don't have the
Foresight?
time, the foresight, maybe, or the time to try to implement something else new when this huge digital revolution is happening. I think, yeah, I think there's a lot of
Yeah, it's basically maybe not a priority or seemingly
yeah,
not a priority. Like climate change, I feel like sometimes obviously it's important, but seemingly it's not affecting us, right away, which I think it
yeah,
is. But you're like, okay, well, let's punt it. Let me go first do what's going to bother me tomorrow instead
right.
of, 2 years, 5 years, 10 years down the road.
It's also super hard as a very small business. I mean, there are eight of us at Duality Systems to go into a hospital and say, you should give us a shot. And it's hard for them, I think, to say yes when they have companies like, UKG and Epic and such that do similar things. I would argue not as well as our algorithm does it, but um, yeah, it's hard to be little.
Yeah, but there are advantages as well. Being little, you are able to pivot to a different problem much easier than a behemoth like Epic or Cerner or any of those other $50 billion companies. It's very hard for them to, with the bureaucracy, bring meaningful changes in the direction of the company. I mean, even for us, I'd like to take a minute to explain what we're up to. So we're the TurboTax for Oasis documentation. And for those of the in the audience who don't know, Oasis is outcome assessment information set, which is a mandatory process for all of home health visits. And in fact, for all of home health starts of cares, it's mandatory that you do a start of care assessment, and then every visit there is more assessment and clinical notes, and then you do discharge, or there may be scenarios if there's rehospitalization, then you have to do recertification, or if the patient transfers. So there's this entire process. And imagine this, just the start of care is 45 minutes of, let's say, actual interaction and providing care, but then another hour and a half to finish the entire documentation. So most clinicians take 2 to 3 hours to finish the entire assessment. And if it's a complex case, then it's closer to 3 hours. And that's such a problem. And we identified that and we're like, okay. And we saw that this was the problem at the very beginning when we were trying to get into home health. But then we were like, look at all these other problems as well. So we were looking at, of course, scheduling is a huge problem, interoperability, because the documents that come from the acute facilities, they are just not in the right formats and not in a standardized format, because the hospitals using Epic more care about, hey, we've got a system and you come to our system, log in and pull the patient, instead of, a small teeny miny $5 million home health agency
Right.
doesn't have as much, you know, say in where and how they receive those patients. So that's a problem. Then, of course, scheduling, huge problem, as I just showed. Even if you have just a dozen nurses, that would present so many challenges. And then there's many more as well. And what I tried to do was, I was like, okay, well, all these challenges are there. Let's go and really talk to the user and see whatever they're describing as the biggest challenge. But a lot of times it depends on, like you said, who you talk to within the organization. They were like, oh, yeah,
Absolutely.
intake's the biggest challenge. Oh, no, 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 billing's the biggest challenge. If you ask the CEO, it could change every single day. So we had that experience. So then here's how I discovered that documentation was going to be one of the first problems that we would solve as Act One. And then, of course, everything would need to slowly be bundled in and can be solved, but the first problem needs to be like the one that is giving the most pain. And if the documentation's not right, of course, your nurses are getting burnt out. If the documentation's not right, you could get ADRs and you could lose your license, you could lose in the audit, and your claims could get denied, then you get the payment late. So we really wanted to focus on educating the home health agency owners on that specific problem. But then again, we had a very hard time, and we still are, because as two CEOs, we're sort of comparing notes and trying to see what's working, what's not. And I think now we have said that, okay, we're going to just have our core use case initially, and the measure for if it's a big enough problem or not is if they open their wallets. That's the bottom line. Because sometimes, yeah, it's a free pilot, great, let's do it. And yes, it's nice to have all these referral documents getting scanned and AI doing a summary, but do you really need it? Or what you really need is for someone to come in and do the documentation. So did you have a similar type of multiple problems and trying to decide? I think maybe it was more from which industry, where initially, because you have such a diverse background, and I know, being a clinician as well, you wanted to first go to healthcare and then to military. Tell me a little bit more about what that decision-making process was.
So I actually joined the military and went to basic training in 1999 at the Air Force Academy. So I was commissioned in 2003, went to nursing school after that. So I knew that I wanted to be in the military. And then I found out that the nursing pathway was available. And then when I got on the floor after graduation, then you kind of realize what the problems are, right? So I think that nurses at their core are natural innovators, and we may or may not think that we are, but we're the ones at the bedside who are seeing the problems, and recognizing and being able to take on some of those problems. One of the biggest problems, and it's just because it happened to be the additional duty that I was handed, was writing that schedule, and it was awful. There are tons of problems in healthcare that I think can be improved, but that was just the one that presented itself to me. But if you look at nurse innovators, man, they are just rocking and rolling with different innovations that are improving healthcare.
Absolutely. And I feel like when you looked at the scheduling challenge, it was the systemness, or systemizing this,
Yes.
that came in. Talk more about that, like how wanting to systemize everything has gotten you results in your career.
I think that everyone, this is a tricky question. So I think that everyone wants to come at problems differently. And when you come at things from a systematic perspective, number one, it can be very difficult to get people to change, because everyone, like I said earlier, like nurses have innovated, they all have a way to fix this problem. What's the best way to fix it? We have all this education and we all think that we were taught the best way, but what is science and the documentation and the history, what does that tell us? The double-blind studies, what does that show us? And so to be able to take that information and spread it over a system, and to be able to have buy-in from multiple people, and to be able to influence that change from a leadership perspective, I think it standardizes. And standardization is not something that I recommend for everything, but it's a starting point. And so I think
you have to scale. Standardization is important. I mean, otherwise,
exactly.
How do you scale?
Exactly. So you standardize, you systemize, and then you can pull out the onesie twosies that don't necessarily fit. But that's what the human-centric part of it is. That's why I don't think that we'll ever get rid of human oversight of AI, just because there's always going to be some outlier.
Totally. And we're seeing it nowadays, right? My role in, of course, the last 2 years has changed significantly as a CEO, but even in the last 6 months has changed so significantly. I feel like because I use AI very heavily, and every day, at least half of my time is using AI tools. And I feel like by using AI, more of my job is now reviewing everything instead of actually producing a slide deck or writing a document. Like tomorrow I'm going to this Texas Alliance for Care at Home, so there's a huge event and there's a list of speakers. So I just asked Claude Cowork to take the list of speakers and arrange it by different categories and come up with their emails. Then I've got my open claw, so that's going to send out an initial email to them and say, hey, just want to say hello and let's meet over there and this is what we're doing and all that stuff. So I just love it that it's more of a manager of the agents or reviewing the documents. But that still is such a big problem, because a lot of times I have my younger team members and they're overexcited and they've built something, and then they would be like, Arvind, look what we created. And I'm like, all right, can you walk me through it? And they can't, because just
Right.
AI did it. And I feel like that's something that we have to educate along the way, and
Yes.
kind of translates to even the nurses. And it builds on what you just said. It's not enough to just have these tools, but instead it's very important to educate on how these tools should be used and how the role is evolving and how it may continue to evolve. Because this much change, oh my God, like we
Yeah.
are living in a time that is just so amazing to be alive and watch this unfold and see. I am just glued to all the amazing AI news that keeps coming out and new models, the progress. How's that, affecting your organization, or how has it changed with, even most recently with a lot of these models becoming so much better?
Yeah. So AI is incredibly diverse. So when people think about AI, in my experience, they think about Chat GPT, right? So they think about large language models, and I give it a prompt and it tells me the answer.
And
Our
hallucinate
version,
sometimes, they're like, yeah.
yeah, exactly. And our AI is algorithmic based. So it's combinatorial algorithms that are made to optimize there. It's not an LLM. It's not gonna take over the world and run the robots. So it's very difficult to, with all of the change happening and all of the HIPAA concerns and security concerns, and like ours is, it's not, it's different. And to try to explain that to someone who does not have the background and thinks of AI as, the robots are taking over the world, it's very scary.
True. And you're right. And I think that's one view from perhaps, not as tech savvy people. But the surprising thing is that even some of the most tech savvy people don't fully grasp and appreciate. And I've seen both camps. Either someone's going to be just too negative about it, or someone's going to be just all the way about AI and it can just solve everything and it can do everything. So, and I feel like we just have to constantly be monitoring and watching and keep going back and trying out those tools. And you're absolutely
Yes.
right, because the LLM era is very different from us already using AI. For
Right.
Verizon, for one of the projects back in 2017, we were identifying objects, and that was very different. And even before then, I mean, Google's been using AI for a very long time. So that's why in my conversations, like even up to 2023, a lot of times the way that I would describe AI was very different from the way that now the LLMs are being used and the capabilities that they have. It's changed dramatically. So I can understand that yours is more of the native sort of AI algorithms and not necessarily just tokenizing everything. You send token and get some tokens back. So I understand. I think for us it's leveraging the latest
Yes.
LLM stuff more, but then also having the guardrails of deterministic rules, and then having human in the loop as well. So we've got that sort of four-layer architecture, and
Yeah.
it's pretty interesting to
Yeah.
be able
You,
to
you
do that.
Yeah, you have to know what right looks like. So when you just plug in, you ask a question and you get an answer back, you have to know, like, is that the answer that I want? Did I ask the right question? Do I need to tune my algorithm, tune my question a little bit, tune my prompt? And so when you get like your young employees who are saying, look at this great tool that I got, it's Yeah, that's fantastic. Is that what we need? Does that work the way that we need it? Like asking the hard questions. Is this output truly what we need? Or do we need to mess with it some more? I worry about my high school age kids who can write a whole paper using AI. And I'm like, I'm looking at this and it doesn't, this, you did not write this. Also, part of it's not factually true. How can we, like, there has to be a middle ground. Like you need to do your own research and then maybe use AI to tie a little bow on it at the end, but you can't use it.
I
It's
love
not
that.
there for everything.
I love that. So let me give you my approach and tell me if you can critique it a little bit. So as an example, and this is maybe, sharing too much, but as an example, I needed to go for therapy. So then of course the therapist in the intake admission form asked for what's going on. So obviously who knows me better than my Claude? And then I've built like a second brain Memex, which has different layers of memory and it scans all my email and the plot device. So, I'm a bit geeky that way. But then I knew that it had very good information about what I needed. However, I just didn't say, hey, go ahead and fill that form out. Or I didn't say, here's the question, give me the answer. I said,
Right.
here's the question and here's how I feel about it. So I voice record that entire, like how I feel about it. And I said, but go back to the memory and substantiate that. And sure enough, it did. And oh my God, it was a very accurate 2-page document. But here's the part that I think that I want to take credit for, that I read through it. Because in the past, I won't even read it and I'll be like, okay, good enough. I read for first couple of lines and then copy, paste, done. But I went through all of it. However, in the first session with the therapist, they're like, okay, that was AI generated. So why don't you tell me what's really going on? And all that. I'm like, dude, that was still me. That was my thoughts. And I had the voice recording that was converted. So what do you think about that? Or have you had, experiences like that with employees internally or with some of the tools?
I mean, not really in turn. So we apply, like I said, we have several small business innovation and research grants through the Department of Defense. That's where we've been able to find the most revenue. And so what we've done is we've set up our own chat GPT where we have saved all of those applications that we've submitted. And so every time we need to submit a new application, it's like, can you answer this question, but answer it using this information? And also, this is what we've done over the past 6 months since we submitted the last application. And then you read
Beautiful.
over it and then you make sure that it fits. And I don't even do LinkedIn posts. Like I write them myself and then I ask my LLM, like, hey, does this make sense? How can I make this sound better? I feel like this is too salesy or too pitchy. Can you make it less? And I mean, I'm to the point where I don't do hardly anything without running it through. And I'm just a chat GPT user. I don't know. I haven't gotten beyond that,
And that's
but I
totally fine. And that's how I also discovered it. And I went crazy. Like I was running a dozen plus deep researches because I had the max plan or whatever. And then I was
yeah.
like, hey, I better utilize it all because I am paying for all these tokens. So I would do all sorts of deep research and then I would use those as playbooks. So like a
Yep.
playbook for pricing strategy. And then I attached that document to Ask Command. So that was initially, but then I discovered there was a tool that came not as popular now, Popeye AI or Poppy AI. So what it did was similar to, and it would just give you, like, you run a prompt on this document and the output is fed to this other prompt that takes another different document. So you could build those flows and have a sort of chain of thought type of prompting done on that and then get the output.
Yeah.
Then I got hooked to Claude, and then when Claude Code came out, oh my God, there's no going back. And now with OpenClaw plugging into Claude Code, so this is like really, really like life changing for me. And trust me, sometimes it does create challenges as well. Like the other day, I had just enabled OpenClaw. And guess what? I had enabled WhatsApp. So it started replying to my WhatsApp messages, and my homeowner association group said, hey, there was a homeless guy. And my OpenClaw said, and this is true story, it said, oh my God, let's look at a perspective. Maybe that person is in need, but I understand that your kid must have felt scared. And the person says, how did you write so much so quickly? Are you an AI? He says, of course I'm an AI. I'm Arvind's, AI. And, I'm just responding. And I'm like, stop. And I didn't even see it that evening. And next day I had, and they had to like temporarily remove me from the group because it wouldn't shut up. And every message it would say completed, completed. And it even posted a lot of stuff on my status. And I know it was a risk that I took. And of course, for a lot of people, that would be like devastating. But I was like, what's
Yeah.
the big deal? I mean, they're my people and they understand. One of them said
Yeah.
that, hey, that would have stolen our data. What data? I mean, sure, data about like we want to put a gate here, sure,
Yeah.
but of course, I'm way more careful when it comes to healthcare. And
Yeah.
that's why the way that we did the product development was initially we had very small teams and we were just building prototypes and showing it to the customers, putting it in front of them. But that wasn't like secure as such because we weren't giving it to them as such. So then when my CTO came in, then we rebuilt everything in a virtual private cloud, single port open, row level encryption there, and we're getting our SOC 2 Type 2, this month. So I think we've come a long way. And yes, of course, there's more risk that I can take on my personal sort of productivity related tasks, but definitely not on
Yeah.
healthcare, not on copper AI for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, fantastic. So in the combinatorial algorithms, for those of who don't know, and in your software, if there is a home health agency that's got the scale that has, let's say, 70 nurses, 1,000 census, 1,000 patients that they're helping, and they want to go about it, they're in a big metro area, let's say, then what would the next steps for them be in working with you or with your organization to come up with this scheduling, solution? How would it
Yeah.
go?
So we have not delved into home health specifically, but we have looked at the traveling salesman problem a little bit more broadly in that there are some facilities that have multiple facilities in a small urban area. And so we've looked at how you would staff multiple facilities with the same set of staff, right? So who's going to go to which facility at which time based on census, based on where they live, how far the drive is, et cetera. So we would want to find an agency that was innovative and willing to work with us and be able to really understand what their problems are. I've gotten a lot of insight from you and I appreciate it from both like the payer perspective, the specialty perspective, documentation, different types of visits, what type of certifications are required to go out to these places, in addition to the kind of the UPS or mail delivery problem where you're going from one place to the other. How can you do that the most efficiently? We love to work very closely with the end user because I feel like if you're going to be paying me money to do this for you, I need to make sure that it actually solves your problem and not the problem that someone two rungs up from you thinks that it is. So for me, I love to talk to the nurses. I love to understand, like, what are you doing now? How are you doing it now? And how would adding optimization algorithms to it improve it? And then we would have multiple iterations of what that schedule would look like until we made sure that it was exactly what they needed. So depending on the size and the complexity and probably the location that the agency was working within, it could take time, but it would, in the end, when you're talking about ROI, I think that if we get that algorithm right, it would be incredibly beneficial for these companies.
Absolutely. And I think, I'm very interested in sort of doing a pilot. And of course, we'd be happy to be the home health knowledge base for you. So, we're not going for every single question with the scheduler in the organization. We could have our baseline and then do a pilot. And once we're able to do it for a few of, the agencies, I think it's rinse repeat. It's going to be very similar, just adding new constraints. And like I said, the basic stuff, yeah, is there. But how do we ensure that, a lot of the algorithms that you've written in your software can be transported over to the home health setting and how those constraints can be labeled? I think it'll be something I would love to, even on this podcast, offer to, if there's a home health agency owner and if you're at least around 500 census for the patients and you have over, let's say, a dozen or 20 nurses, and you would like to run this experiment, we would love to try to figure out what a quick discovery on this could look like and what that solution might be. And I think that's what we would have to do, partner with a lot of the innovators who actually want to make a difference and try to piece a lot of these things together to come up with a comprehensive solution that solves a lot of the challenges, all the way from interoperability to scheduling to, obviously documentation. And then there are many other challenges as well when you go deeper, like care coordination is a huge challenge. Yes. Then patient education is a huge challenge. And that's why I find everything so interesting. And that's why a lot of times, I have to tell myself, no. Remember what your core use case is. And
focus, Arvind. Focus.
I know. And that's been a problem, for me for a very long time. And I had to work consciously towards not doing too many things because, of course, the compounding effect only comes when you're actually focused and all day thinking about it. And, even in some of the books that I've read, you actually need to get bored, like have nothing to do and still have that goal to really think about a top solution. Like you become really creative when you're absolutely bored. Mm-hmm. That's what Brené Brown says in her book, Atlas of the Heart. It's one of my favorite books. Well, very cool, very cool. So, Laurel, what's for you guys? What's coming this year? What are some of your goals and ambitions for the company?
We are headed to Vive in Los Angeles.
Very cool, yeah.
On Sunday, so we'll be there. Would love to chat with anyone who's out there. And then hoping that the government reopens the Small Business Innovation Research grants. There's just so much innovation in this country comes from small businesses, and having that, recognizing that they're trying to solve a problem by shutting it down for a little while, but having that available has been fantastic for us to develop our product. So looking for that to open back up, and then hopefully get into a few hospitals. It's crazy to me that the US government is easier to penetrate than healthcare, but that has been the case for us up until this program shut down. So I would love to get in and help nurses and therefore help patients.
Fantastic. And Laurel, before we wrap up, if someone's listening and they're dealing with scheduling chaos, whether it's home health or any other 24/7 operation, how do they reach you?
Yeah, absolutely. Our website is dualitysys.com. That's DUALITYSYS.com. My personal email is Laurel, LAUREL, @Duality Systems.
And for anyone struggling with OASIS documentation or intake, you can reach us at copperdigital.com or email me at arvind@copperdigital.com. Laurel, thanks for sharing your story from military nurse dealing with 18-hour scheduling sessions to CEO of an AI company that schedules missile silos. That's a journey. Thanks. Really appreciate it.
Thank you, Arvind. It was my pleasure. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you.